Today, the theme is courage, and it's building on what we heard in the message yesterday. Same scripture. I wanted to just pull out a couple of more things. Matthew chapter 14. We live in a society that, as I listen to people speak about how we make our society better, there's a lot of talk about virtues that we need to love. I heard the governor of Illinois talk about that. Hey, love is the greatest thing, and we need to love, and we need to be gracious, and we need to be bold, and we need to be courageous. All of these things, and the danger or the hazard of it is great virtues, don't get me wrong. But when they are not connected to God, when Christ is not in the center of it, it's just humanistic effort. And in the end, it's futile. The age of enlightenment brought that to us. 1500s or so, we started thinking, oh, you know what? We have this thing figured out. But we see that in the past century, World War I, World War II, the massive amount of wars that we've had, we see that all of these great virtues, man cannot bring to fruition on his own. And so courage is no different. And as Christians, we are called to be courageous. But if we preach courage without Christ, we're going to be in chaos. So the scripture that we have is in Matthew chapter 14. Jesus does this great miracle, feeds the crowds. And then it says immediately afterwards, it said immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. The people wanted to make him king. In Mark's account of this, we see that probably the disciples did too. They're getting excited like, oh man, this is the Messiah. And Jesus is saying, hey, get into the boat. Stop thinking like this humanistic thought. Get into this boat and go before him to the other side. So this is an assignment that he gives them. Hey, get into the boat. I'm going to disperse the crowds. And then he said he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. Now, when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by waves, for the wind was contrary. The wind was strong. Now, at the fourth watch in the Roman guard time, if you will, that's between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Now, I don't know why it took them maybe that long. The lake is about 4.5 miles wide. I'm thinking they left the evening before when he fed somebody, maybe around 7, 8 o'clock. It's between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's the fourth watch. And Jesus went to them walking on the sea. So Jesus is now walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were afraid. They were troubled, saying, it is a ghost. And they cried out for fear. The first thing I'll say there is when you're not looking for Jesus, when you're not looking for Christ, when you're not abiding in him, you're not going to recognize him. But he was walking toward them. This is a classic story in Christian tradition where Jesus comes to us in our storms. It's so true. When we're not checking for him, he's coming to us in our storms. But it says, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled. Verse 27, but immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good courage. It is I, do not be afraid. Now, Peter always gets a bad rap, and that's the integrity of the Gospels, that we see a man who is human, who has flaws. And that's why I believe the Gospels are so real, because if it wasn't, he would have said, hey, take that out. But Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So he said, come. Now, Jesus gives a command now, right? It says, come, because Jesus is saying, hey, command me. And Jesus says, come. This is not just, hey, I'm giving you permission. He gives them the command, come. And when he does, it says, and when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. So we see here that Peter, first of all, has his eyes on Jesus, sees Jesus, and has this request to come out on the water. Now, again, if we approach courage from our perspective, from our ability to do things, this miracle would have never happened. Now, we see that his doubt eventually got him sinking, but it takes a person of faith to walk on the water. We see no one else except Jesus walk on water up to this point, and yet Peter does. And so when I think about the specific points that I want us to call out here, the reason Peter walked on water is because he had faith and trust in Jesus. That gave him the boldness to take the courage. He would have never done that on his own. And here's the other piece. The Lord gives us the grace and the power to carry out the commands. The reason he walked on water is because Jesus gave him the ability and the power to do it. Remember, when we abide in the vine, that's how we bear fruit. Don't ever think that you're going to walk on water. Don't ever think that you're going to do something miraculous with your own ability. Jesus gave him that. That's when he said, come. At that time, he was infused with power to do it. And here's the other piece. If we're willing to have the courage to step out in faith, just like in Joshua chapter 3, where we see the priests, they step into the river and there's still water running, but the water had stopped a long way off. Remember at Adam, the town called Adam? So it was just a matter of time before that water would run out, but they didn't know that. So if we're willing to step out in courage and in faith, that courage will come. And then at that point, God can do miraculous things in and through us.